Until dawn! Free mix, free mix, free mix.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm doing one of my first vlogs, which are a popular thing to do now. I got some really exciting things to bring to you guys down the road, but for right now, most people who know me know how much of a '90s lover and kid I am at heart. And recently, I discovered something that I thought was absolutely amazing. I mean, fucking amazing. And anyway, yeah, so I wanted to bring that to you guys. And it's kind of something of a foreshadowing of a project that I'm working on right now. So I hope you guys are excited and I hope you guys get ready. I got a lot of nice stuff to bring you guys in the future at Griff Originals. And I can't wait to show you guys. So check it out.
Welcome to our special meeting of the Midnight Society. My name's Gary.
I'm Samantha.
And I'm Kiki.
We're glad you could join us. We're always on the lookout for kids who have what it takes.
Who really like scary stories.
To join us around our campfire here in the woods.
Now that you're here, we can get started with tonight's meeting. Are you guys ready?
Yeah. Who's first? Gary?
Okay. Kiki said that we all like scary stories. That's true. And that's what my first story's about. It's about a scary movie, actually. One particular movie that's even more frightening than usual.
Cool. Very cool.
That's the weird thing about scary movies. You ever notice how sometimes it's even more frightening to watch one in your own home? At least in a movie theater, you're surrounded by other people. But at home, you might just be all by yourself. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this story The Tale of the Virtual Nightmare. Jay Barzak loved terror. Okay, he liked adventure and comedy too. But whenever he went to the video store, the horror section was always his first stop. His friend, Mr. Rodriguez, was the owner. He loved scary movies as much as Jay did, and was always on the lookout for new, terrifying stuff. One day, Jay stopped by the store as usual. He was psyched because Mr. Rodriguez promised to lend him his personal copy of a special video that had just come in. But when he got there, the tiny store was empty.
Hello?
No one was there. The place was even messier than usual, with cassettes scattered around, and that wasn't all. There were strange scratches on the floor. 4 deep, shiny gouges in the old wooden boards. The mess gave Jay a funny feeling. Should he call the police? But he didn't want to cause any trouble. Maybe Mr. Rodriguez had been moving stuff around and had just stepped out. Maybe the scratches had always been there and Jay had never noticed them. That's when he saw it. A video cassette in a plain white case. Across the top in black letters was the title, Virtual Nightmare. And stuck to the case was a yellow gummy label that said, For Jay. Despite his funny feeling, Jay was excited. This must be the movie Mr. Rodriguez was talking about. But where was he? I'm sure he's okay, he decided. And he picked up the tape and headed home. Jay's mom was in the kitchen making dinner. Jay snuck past her into the den and popped the tape in the VCR. He picked up the remote, then stopped. Why did he feel so nervous? He shook off the feeling and hit play. And there on the screen was a funny-looking dragon, black and scaly. It was flying across a purplish sky, beating its wings. An animal dangled from its claws. That was it. No title, no actors, no sound even. Just the dragon. Jay fast-forwarded the tape, but the dragon was all there was, all the way through. He turned up the volume as loud as it would go. There was some kind of sound, but it was impossible to make out. A grinding, whirring noise. What a ripoff. Jay ejected the tape in disgust. The next day, Jay was about to return the tape when he decided to take one last look. He popped it in the VCR and hit play. But the picture seemed different somehow. The dragon seemed sharper, more real. The funny noise was louder, too. Jay leaned forward, so close his nose was almost touching the screen, and he could finally see what the dragon was holding in its claws. It wasn't an animal. It was a man. Jay found himself clenching up inside, and he dropped the remote. When he glanced up, he could swear the dragon noticed him. It had turned its head, and to Jay's disbelief, it changed direction. Now it was flying at him, its wings flapping, its huge jaw open wide. Jay snapped off the VCR and yanked out the tape. All he wanted was to get rid of it. He ran to the video store, but when he got there, it was closed. The door was locked. Mr. Rodriguez was nowhere to be found. Now Jay was really scared. Still holding the tape, he started running home. He passed an appliance store with TVs in its windows, all showing the same channel. Jay stopped. For some reason, he just had to stare at the flickering video. It was some soap opera. The images blinked once, and then, one by one, switched to the flying dragon. Jay gasped. There were now 20 dragons flying through a weirdly purple sky. All of them were staring right at Jay, and they were getting closer. With every ounce of strength he had, Jay wrenched himself away. He was still holding the cassette. He threw it in a trash can and ran home. In the living room, Jay's dad was watching TV. Jay flinched with fear, but it was only football. A normal, regular old football game. What a relief. Jay was on his way up to his room when the sound of the game faded away. The picture flickered, and suddenly, the dragon filled the screen, even bigger than before. Once again, Jay felt his eyes lock on the screen, and now, it was easy to see who the dragon was holding in his claws. It was Mr. Rodriguez. Jay screamed. Ah! His father turned and stared at him. "Hey, what's up?" he asked. Jay's heart was pounding. He pointed wordlessly at the screen. Jay's dad turned and looked at the TV. It was a football game again. The dragon had gone. Jay wondered if he was going insane. He slowly backed away, then went crashing upstairs. He ran into his room and slammed the door. But he had forgotten about his TV in the corner. When he turned around, it switched itself on. Jay tried to scream, but nothing came out. He tried to run, but everything felt like molasses. The dragon filled the TV screen, and Jay found himself walking slowly, stiffly toward it. The dragon was getting closer. Its red eyes glittered, its neck muscles stretched as its wings beat the air. And the grinding, whirring sound was almost deafening. But what was that other sound? A voice. A human voice. It was Mr. Rodriguez. Very faint but distinct. It's only a dream, Jay thought frantically. Wake up! But he couldn't stop himself from slowly, surely moving forward. It was like a giant magnet was pulling him, and he couldn't break free. A glass of lemonade was standing on his night table. With all his strength, Jay managed to grab it, just as the dragon came crashing through the TV screen in an explosion of smoke and fire. Jay couldn't throw the glass, not that it would have helped. So, desperate, he did the only thing he could think of to wake up. He poured it over his head. And choking and gasping, he could finally scream. Ah! Jay blinked. He was lying in bed. The dragon was gone and morning sunlight was streaming in. His heart was hammering and his throat was dry. At the foot of his bed, the TV was on, but the picture was a mess of static. The door opened, and Jay's mom came in. "What was that noise?" she asked. She noticed the TV. "Jay, did you go to sleep watching another horror movie? No wonder you have nightmares. Look, you're covered in sweat." She sniffed the air. "And why do you smell like lemons?" Jay was soaking wet, and there was something tickling his chest. He waited until his mom left before pulling the covers away so he could see what it was. His t-shirt was completely shredded. When he held the cloth together, he could see that there were 4 long gashes through it, just like the ones that he had seen on the floor of the video store. Scratches from a dragon's claws. Claws that came too close.
Excellent story, Gary.
Yeah, it was cool.
Glad you guys liked it.
So, are we ready for another?
Sure,
You bet.
Who's next, me or Sam?
you go.
Okay, here goes. This is a story about loneliness and making friends. What's so scary about making friends? Plenty, if your new friend likes to play some very dangerous games. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this story The Tale of the Lonely Doll. Janine was playing a video game when she had the weird feeling someone was watching. She looked up, and there was her kid sister Mary staring at her with her big eyes. Mary was always hanging around, sucking your thumb, saying nothing. It drove Janine crazy. Yeah, what do you want? Look what you made me do. Wanted to show you something, Mary said. As always, Janine felt immediately bad for yelling at Mary. She was only a kid after all. Show me what? She asked, more nicely. I got a new friend, said Mary, holding something out. Look. It was a dirty, ragged doll, missing most of its hair. Ew, said Janine. That's disgusting. But she talks, said Mary. Listen. She pulled a ring that hung out of the doll's back.
Hello. My name is Talking Terry. I like my new home.
That voice gave Janine a funny feeling. Mary was smiling at her doll, but the doll seemed to be staring at Janine. Its plastic eyes glittered. Janine stepped back. Who gave it to you? She asked. No one, said Mary. I was out back by myself. Talking Terry said she's my friend. Janine felt bad again. Mary was by herself because her big sister wouldn't play with her. Their mom was always scolding her about it. But that doll was disgusting. It was really gross. Janine turned and headed out of the room. The two girls shared a bedroom, and there was a big trunk where they kept all their stuff. To Janine's disgust, Mary wanted to keep Talking Terry in the trunk. Their mom backed her up. Even though the doll didn't look very nice, Mary had every right to keep it. But Janine had a hard time going to sleep that night with that thing in their room. She kept thinking she heard noises coming from the trunk. And when she finally fell asleep, she had a terrible dream. The doll was crouched over something, ripping at it like an animal.
I'm your only dolly now.
Janine screamed and woke with a start. It was morning. She looked across the room and gasped. It looked like the trunk had exploded. All their toys and dolls were scattered across the floor, broken, shredded, ripped to pieces. Janine ran to the trunk and looked in. There at the bottom was Talking Terry, staring up and grinning. The door opened and their mom came in. What on earth? She said. Who did this? That did, Janine cried, pointing. That thing. Their mom frowned. Janine, you're in charge of this room, she said. Clean this up at once. Janine grabbed the doll. It was weirdly hot, almost as if it were alive. She ran to the window, opened it, and threw the doll out as hard as she could. She watched it land behind some bushes at the far end of the yard. When Janine came home from school, her mom scolded her. You're lucky we found that doll, she said. Mary was almost hysterical looking for it. But Mom, Janine interrupted. It's not a normal doll. It's really... There was a sudden crash. Janine and her mom ran upstairs. The heavy trunk had somehow flipped completely upside down. Underneath, Mary's muffled voice was screaming hysterically. Their mom yanked the trunk off. Mary was curled in a ball, holding her head and crying. The doll lay a few feet away near the bed. It was staring up at Janine with that awful smile. Suddenly, it said in its scratchy voice,
Now it's your turn to play.
Janine kicked the doll as hard as she could. Now do you believe me, she shouted. It almost killed her. Mary was put to bed. She wasn't badly hurt, but she wouldn't stop crying. Why did she do that? She wept. She was my friend. That afternoon, Janine grabbed the doll and headed outside. There was smoke in the air. Mr. Fletcher down the street was burning leaves in his yard. Janine pretended to watch the bonfire and smiled at Mr. Fletcher, who was raking leaves. She waited until his back was turned, then threw the doll into the flames. She turned and ran before he could see what she did. The next day was Saturday. Mary was well enough to go out, so their parents took her with them when they went to visit friends next door. Janine was left alone to watch TV, which was fine with her. At first, Janine, curled in front of the TV, thought the scratching sound was part of the movie. Then she hit the mute button and listened. What was that? Janine held her breath. Was it her imagination? But no. There it was again. With a sick feeling, Janine realized the sound was coming from the front door. Something was out there trying to get in. Janine stood up, her heart pounding. "It's a cat," she said, even though she knew it wasn't. "Shoo! Go away!" But the noise didn't stop. It went on and on, like fingernails dragging down a stone wall. Janine ran to her room, dove into bed, and pulled pillows over her head. But she could still hear it, and she knew it was out there, waiting to be let back in. Janine knew what she had to do. Trying to feel brave, she walked back down to the door. The scratching stopped as she grabbed the handle. "Okay," she said to herself. 1, 2, she hesitated, and 3, she yanked the door open. The doll was standing there, blackened and charred almost beyond recognition. It fell forward, its eyes glinting.
Hello, my name is Talking Terry, and I'm going to...
Janine slammed the door as hard as she could on the doll's neck. The doll's head was now dangling by a wire, the eyes popping open and shut. Janine grabbed an umbrella. She opened the door and, taking aim, swung the umbrella with all her might. The doll went flying, its broken body turning over and over past the hedges and across the lawn. The scream faded away as Janine slammed the door. That afternoon, a girl was wandering down the sidewalk. She was lonely and wished she had someone to play with. She tripped over something and stopped to see what it was. It was weird, a round, black object the size of a baseball. It was so gross she almost threw it away. But something cool happened. Bright blue eyes suddenly fluttered open in the ball.
Hello, my name is Talking Terry. I want to be your friend.
And then, terribly, it smiled.
Wow.
That was a great story, Kiki.
Yeah. All I can think of is that doll's head smiling. Ew.
Very creepy.
I'm glad you guys like.
So, I guess it's my turn, right?
Yeah. What have you got for us, Sam?
Well, okay. I was thinking the other day about ghosts and haunted houses.
Cool. Sounds good to me.
You know how creepy it is when you hear something but you don't know what it is? Well, just imagine a door. It's locked, right? And that means nothing can get through it. Nothing human, that is. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, I call the story The Tale of the Locked Door. Lisa was alone with her brother Sean in a tiny cabin in Vermont. This vacation was supposed to be fun, but the place was totally creepy. It was full of cobwebs with dead bugs in them. The wind howled in the old chimney. Plus, there was that weird locked door at the bottom of the cellar stairs. Lisa didn't like that at all. She looked out the window. It was snowing hard, and the sky was so dark it looked black. "It's late," she said. "Why isn't Dad back yet?" Their dad had left on skis that afternoon to buy groceries in town. Chill out, said Sean. He'll be back soon. The wind howled again. Or was it something else? What was that? Asked Lisa. What was what? Sean was flipping through an old magazine. He didn't even bother to look up. This place gives me the creeps, said Lisa. I wish Dad didn't tell us about that guy. The one who used to live here, said Sean. So some geezer gets lost in a blizzard. Big deal. But it could happen to Dad, said Lisa. Sean groaned. Get real, he said. The wind shrieked in the chimney. But there was another sound, too. Listen, said Lisa suddenly. Do you hear it now? Sean looked up. There really was something. It sounded like fingernails scrabbling on a wooden board. And a whimpering sound. Together, Lisa and Sean stared down the rickety steps leading to the cellar. It's coming from behind that door, she whispered. Sean made his hands into claws. It's the abominable snowman. He's coming to get you. Cut it out, hissed Lisa. Okay, the door was clearly locked tight with a rusty bolt and padlock. But something was wrong. Look, she whispered, pointing. The door was shaking slightly, and the scrabbling, whimpering noises were louder. It's just the wind, said Sean. But he didn't sound so sure. The door suddenly shook violently. That's not the wind, said Lisa. She felt sick to her stomach. The old lock jolted with the impact. Don't be stupid, said Sean. What could it possibly be but But suddenly the lock snapped off with a crack. The door burst open, and with a deafening roar, a gigantic thing came hurtling up the stairs, dripping with jaws open wide. Sean screamed and fell backwards, but Lisa saw immediately what it was. It was just a dog. A big old St. Bernard with an old leather collar around its neck. Get away, screamed Sean, covering his face. No, shouted Lisa. It's okay. See? It's just a dog. She put out her trembling hand and the dog licked it. She hesitantly patted it, and its tail thumped. It's okay, Sean. He's not going to hurt us. The dog ran to the front door and scratched on it, whimpering. See, said Lisa. He just wants to go out. But how did he get down there in the first place, said Sean, totally confused. Why didn't we hear it? Lisa opened the door and the dog bounded out into the snow. Curtains of white flakes swirled out of the dark sky, but the dog didn't seem to mind. It just plunged into the drifts, then stopped, lifted its head and howled. I think he wants something, said Lisa. The dog howled again. It turned and looked at Lisa, and then faintly, Lisa heard something. Was it a man calling? Listen, she shouted. There's someone out there. I don't hear anything, said Sean. Lisa grabbed her down jacket. Let's go, she said. No way, said Sean. Are you nuts? Lisa glared at him. I don't care if you're too scared, she said, but I'm going to follow him. All right, said Sean. He grabbed his big red flashlight and his coat. The two headed out into the snow. It was incredibly deep and the wind was freezing. The dog kept bounding ahead through the deep drifts, and they had a hard time keeping up. They struggled up the side of one hill, then the dog led them down the other. I don't think you heard anything, gasped Sean. Lisa was starting to wonder herself, but she wouldn't turn back. He's leading us somewhere. I know it, she insisted. They struggled up the top of the next hill. It was completely dark now, and there was a spooky forest just ahead. We're gonna get lost out here, called Sean. We can follow our tracks back, Lisa replied. Still, she wasn't so sure. She could barely see in front of her, and she was freezing. Then, the dog stopped. It barked. Lisa and Sean stared into the darkness. Suddenly, they saw it. There was a man lying in the snow. Dad? Lisa yelled. Lisa, Sean. It was their father. They ran to him and hugged him tight. He was shivering and his teeth chattered. Thank heavens you found me, he gasped. I got lost and I fell and twisted my ankle. But how on earth did you find me? The dog, said Lisa. He led us to you. Their dad looked puzzled. What dog? Lisa glanced around. He was right here. she said. The one who barked just now. Their dad shook his head. I didn't hear anything. A strange, prickly feeling ran across the back of Lisa's neck. Sean, she said, give me the flashlight. He handed it to her. Lisa shone the light around. See? There are his paw prints. They were paw prints, all right. But they only went as far as Lisa's dad. Then they stopped. The dog had disappeared. Sean and Lisa looked at each other. This dog, said their dad. It wasn't... You didn't see what kind of dog it was, did you? Lisa had the prickly feeling again. It was a St. Bernard, she said. Their dad was silent for a long time before he spoke. You remember about the gentleman who used to live in the cabin? Well, he had a St. Bernard. But how long ago, began Lisa? That was 40 years ago, said their dad quietly. And when the old man disappeared, no one remembered about his dog locked down in the cellar. It starved to death down there. Lisa and Sean shivered. And then, far away through the falling snow, they heard it. A strange, unearthly howl.
Wow. That dog.
It was waiting down there all those years, and it was still faithful.
Right. And when it gets out, it finally saves someone.
Only it's not the owner. It's their dad.
Cool story.
Yeah, Sam, that was terrific.
Thanks.
So who's next? Gary, you have one more story, don't you?
Yeah. Are you guys ready?
Uh-huh.
Go for it.
Okay. Picture, if you will, one of the most ordinary places you could imagine. Some place where everything is so normal all the time that it's hard to imagine anything weird ever happening there. No, not your living room, not your backyard. This story takes place in a mall.
You mean like a shopping mall?
Pretty normal, huh? But sometimes it's the most normal places that can be the scariest. Because, well, they're familiar. Too familiar. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this story The Tale of the Mysterious Mall. Ever have the feeling someone was watching you? Denny and his kid sister Liz were clothes shopping at the mall with their mom. It was a crowded Saturday, and Denny was really hoping he wouldn't run into anyone he knew. But that was the weird thing. After a while, Denny could tell someone was watching him. Definitely. He stopped walking and shot a quick look over his shoulder. Liz crashed into him. Ow, she said. What's up? It's weird, said Denny, but I feel like someone's watching me. They both looked around. People were milling through the aisles, pushing clothes around on racks. No one was even looking in their direction. Liz made a face. You're nuts, she said. Who'd want to watch you? Denny shrugged and shook his head. But then, suddenly, he knew. It was a store dummy, or mannequin as her mom called them, standing right in front of them. It was a boy dressed in a purple striped shirt and jeans. Wow, said Liz. You're right. I mean, look at his eyes. It was true. The eyes look real somehow. Oh, man, whispered Denny. And it's not just him. They looked around. There were dozens of mannequins all around them, all kids. And they all had the same horrible eyes, bright, glittering, and wet. Look, said Denny under his breath. They're all staring at us. Liz shivered. Quit scaring me, she said. Wait a minute, said Denny. Where's Mom? They looked around. She was gone. It's okay, said Denny quickly. He could tell Liz was starting to freak out. And to be honest, so was he. We'll just go to the manager's office. They can find her for us. The manager's office was at the back of the store. Behind the official-looking door, a pretty blonde lady was sitting at a big desk. At first glance, she looked friendly and kind. But closer up, Denny wasn't so sure. Is something wrong? She asked. We lost our mom, said Denny. Well, don't worry, the lady said. I'll make an announcement. We'll find her soon enough. Liz sighed with relief. "Here," said the lady, smiling. "You can have a snack while you're waiting." And with that, she put a plate of cookies in front of them and poured 2 glasses of milk. Then she headed out. Denny looked at Liz. "I don't like her," he whispered. "Me neither," she said. "But these are awesome cookies." Cautiously, Denny tried one. They really were good. Big, soft-baked chocolate chips with no nuts. But he couldn't eat it. He still felt funny. Liz was already into her 3rd cookie and had drunk all her milk, too. Denny didn't even touch his. There was something about that lady he just didn't trust. "I think we should go," he said suddenly. He tried to stand, but could barely move. There was a strange roaring noise in his ears that got louder and louder, and flashes of light went off like fireworks. Everything went black. And Denny blinked. He was lying face down on the carpet. It took him a minute to remember where he was. Then he looked at his watch and gasped. It was almost midnight. "Liz," he said. The manager's office was completely empty. Denny went out into the store. It was like another planet. Dark, totally empty, and silent. Outside the glass walls, the rest of the mall was pitch black. "Liz!" He stopped to listen. What was that other noise? A rustling sound and a whispering. Denny strained his eyes. All around the edges of the store, there were dozens of shadowy figures slowly moving towards him. Who were they? The whispering was getting louder, but he couldn't make out what it was. "Hello?" One of the figures moved into a dim patch of light. It was a mannequin. Denny gasped. He could see them all now. There were dozens of them slowly shuffling towards him through the dark, their eyes wet and gleaming. They seemed to be whispering something, and they were getting closer. Denny tried to scream but couldn't. He backed away and tripped over a store display. Then he ran through the dark store. He crashed into a stack of shoeboxes and sent them flying. Behind him, the mannequins were getting closer and closer. There was a door with light showing around the edges. Denny grabbed the handle and yanked it open. Inside, it was brightly lit. The store manager was kneeling in front of a girl mannequin, buttoning its wool jacket. She spun around as Denny entered. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "You're not supposed to be awake yet." She didn't look pretty anymore. She looked like a witch. But Denny wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the mannequin. It looked exactly like Liz. The same brown hair, the same eyes, and as he watched, a tear formed in one of those eyes and slid down its cheek. Denny's heart was pounding. "What have you done to my sister?" "Sister?" The lady was smiling now, like she was pretending she wasn't mad anymore. "I haven't seen her around. But if you wait until I'm finished, we can go look for her. Then we'll call your parents." Her eyes glinted. "Poor thing. You must be tired and thirsty. Care for a little something in the meantime?" And with that, she held out a glass. Denny stared at it. It was just milk, cool and white. But he remembered what had happened that afternoon. He and Liz had both eaten cookies, but only she drank the milk. And now, she was a statue and he wasn't. Behind Denny, the door bumped. The whispering was so loud it sounded like it was in the room. And Denny could finally hear what it was saying. Denny took the glass of milk. He lifted it up to his mouth as if he was going to drink it. But then he threw it into the lady's face. She screamed. She grabbed her face as if the milk was burning her and tried to attack Denny. But her movements were stiff and jerky. She was turning into a mannequin. Her mouth opened to scream one last time, but nothing came out. And there she was, frozen solid, her hands still reaching out like claws. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the air was full of voices, all laughing, shouting, and crying. The mannequins, dozens of them, came rushing in. Only they weren't mannequins anymore. They turned back into kids. And Denny was their hero. The girl mannequin was gone, too. In her place was Liz, back to normal. "You saved me," she shouted to Denny. "You broke the spell." Over her shoulder, Denny could see what was left of the store manager. She was just a mannequin, just a bunch of harmless plastic. Only something was odd. It was the eyes. They were bright blue, glistening wet, and furious.
Oh man, so she was still in there.
You know, I always hated those store dummies. They always look like they're alive.
Thanks, Gary. I'll never be able to go to a mall again.
Me neither. But that was a great story.
They were all great.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's it. And to you guys at home, I hope you enjoyed sitting in. I declare this special meeting of the Midnight Society closed.
Hey, who's heading home?
I think I'll walk with you.
I think maybe we should all go together.
Hey, wait up!
See you next time.